They always thought you'd be there, no matter how far they pulled back, no matter how cold they became, no matter how many times they disappeared. You were their safety net, catching them every time they let go. But what happens when the safety net vanishes? When you step back? When you stop being the one who always cushions their fall? For the avoidant, this moment isn't just surprising. It's destabilizing. It forces them to face something they've spent their whole life avoiding. A reality where they can no longer take your presence for granted. The illusion of the safety net. The avoidant lives with an unspoken belief. You'll always be there. They may not say it out loud. They may not even admit it to themselves. But deep down, they count on your persistence. They expect you to chase. They expect you to soothe. They expect you to close the distance they create. And because you've done it so many times before, they come to rely on it. Your pursuit becomes part of the relationship's rhythm. They pull away. You lean in. They go silent. You break the silence. They avoid. You bridge the gap. To them, this feels natural, not malicious, not calculated, just the way things are. But beneath it all, there's a quiet entitlement, a sense that no matter how many walls they build, you'll always find a way to climb over them. That no matter how many doors they close, you'll keep knocking until they finally let you in. This is the illusion of the safety net, and it shapes everything. It allows them to run without fear of truly losing you. It allows them to stay emotionally distant, knowing you'll supply the closeness for both of you. It allows them to take risks with your patience, because they believe your love has no breaking point. But here's the truth. Safety nets aren't permanent. They wear thin. They fray. They break. And when you finally stop being the one who holds the net beneath them, the avoidant finds themselves in free fall. The shock of absence. For the avoidant, your presence was like air, so constant. They stopped noticing it was there. They didn't have to ask for it. They didn't have to work for it. It was just given, freely, consistently, predictably. And that's why your absence hits like a storm. At first, they don't believe it. They assume you're just pulling back temporarily. That, like before, you'll break the silence. That you'll fold under the tension. That you'll reach out with a text, a call, a message saying, "Are you okay?" But when that moment doesn't come, confusion sets in. They replay the last interaction in their mind, searching for the turning point, trying to pinpoint the exact second when the rhythm changed. They wonder, did I go too far this time? Why aren't they chasing? What shifted? It's disorienting, because the entire pattern of connection they relied on suddenly feels broken. And for someone who craves control, this lack of predictability is unsettling. The avoidant built walls to keep closeness out, but they also built those walls with the unspoken assurance that you'd always be standing on the other side, waiting for a crack to appear. Now, when they peek through, you're not there, and the silence they once thought they wanted suddenly feels too loud, too heavy, too permanent. This shock doesn't look the way you might expect. They may not cry. They may not confess regret. They may not chase in obvious, dramatic ways. Instead, it shows up subtly, in delayed replies that suddenly turn into quick ones, in conversations that once ended abruptly, now stretching just a little longer, in questions masked as casual curiosity. So, how have you been? It's the avoidance way of testing the waters, trying to see if the net is still there, if you're still catchable, if they can still count on the one thing they swore they didn't need. But here's the paradox. The absence of the safety net does two things at once. It unsettles them, and it awakens them. It unsettles them because it disrupts their control. They're no longer dictating the distance. They're no longer the one pulling the strings. The script has flipped. and they're not sure how to play their part. It awakens them because, maybe for the first time, they glimpse what true loss feels like. Not imagined loss, not the loss they threaten themselves with to stay safe, but the kind of loss that's real, tangible, irreversible if they don't act. And that realization terrifies them. Because here's the truth. Avoidants may fear closeness, but they also fear abandonment. They crave connection, but can't tolerate its weight. They want love, but panic at the cost of it. So when you stop being the one who chases, they find themselves trapped in their own contradiction, wanting what they once rejected, needing what they once dismissed, longing for the very presence they worked so hard to push away. It's the shock of absence. And for the avoidant, it changes everything. The awakening of need. The longer your silence stretches, the heavier it becomes for them. At first, they brushed it off, told themselves they were fine, convinced themselves they didn't care. But avoidance only works when the other person is still present. It only works when they know the connection is there to retreat from. When that connection disappears, their defenses stop making sense. Because what are you retreating from when there's no one left standing at the door? This is where the awakening begins. It's not loud. It's not sudden. It creeps in quietly, in the small moments they thought wouldn't matter. When they pick up their phone and notice it hasn't lit up with your name. When they scroll through conversations, realizing the thread has gone cold. When they reach for the comfort of knowing you're there and find only silence staring back. It unsettles them. But deeper than that, it stirs something they try to bury. Need. Avoidants spend years convincing themselves they don't need anyone. That self-sufficiency is strength. That detachment is safety. But the truth? That belief was always a shield against the pain of depending, a shield against the fear of being left. Now, without you as the safety net, the cracks in that shield start to show. They realize that part of them does need. It needs care. It needs reassurance. It needs the kind of presence they once pretended they could live without. And that realization feels dangerous, exposing, like standing in the middle of a crowded room, without armor. Here's the paradox again. The more they realize they need you, the more vulnerable they feel. And the more vulnerable they feel, the more they want to retreat. But retreating no longer brings relief, because retreating into distance only makes the silence louder, only makes the absence sharper, only reminds them of what they no longer have. So the strategies that once worked, pushing you away, minimizing the connection, avoiding the depth, start failing them. And for someone who relies on control, this failure is terrifying. So what do? They begin to circle. They don't chase directly, not in the way you might expect. Instead, they hover, drop small messages, send subtle signals, show up in half-hearted ways. It's not commitment. It's not full pursuit. It's testing. They want to know, is the net still there? If I lean a little closer, will they catch me again? Or is it really gone this time? This is the awakening of need. For the avoidant, it's a deeply uncomfortable place. Because on one hand, they're feeling something they swore they didn't. A longing, a desire, a dependence. On the other hand, their entire identity has been built on not needing anyone. So every time they feel the pull toward you, it clashes with the walls they've spent years building. And that clash creates an inner battle. Move toward what they need, or retreat to what feels safe. It's not a smooth process. It's messy, confusing, full of push and pull. But underneath it all, something undeniable has shifted. They can't unfeel the absence. They can't unknow the silence. They can't unrealize the need. And once that awakening begins, it's impossible to go back to pretending they never cared. This is why your withdrawal has so much impact. It forces them to face the very thing they've spent years outrunning. Not your rejection, not your anger, but their own need, their own hunger for connection, their own truth. That love has always mattered to them, even when they couldn't admit it. And that truth, once felt, changes the entire dynamic. The push-pull dance. Once their need awakens, the storm begins. Because what they feel in their body, that craving for connection, that ache for your presence, clashes violently with what they believe in their mind. Their mind whispers, needing someone makes you weak. If you get too close, you'll only get hurt. You can't trust love. It always takes more than it gives. But their heart is saying something different. Reach out. Don't let them slip away. This silence is breaking you more than closeness ever could. And caught between these two voices, the avoidant doesn't choose one. They try to live in both. That's when the dance begins. The push and the pull. They send a message, then disappear for days. They say they want to see you, then cancel at the last minute. They hint at missing you, then cover it up with a joke. Every step forward is followed by a step back. Every act of closeness is shadowed by retreat. It's not because they don't feel. It's because they feel too much. Their feelings are real, but their fear is louder. Imagine someone trying to drink water while also holding their breath. That's what love feels like to the avoidant in this stage. A desperate thirst colliding with the terror of drowning. So they reach, then snatch their hand back, lean in, then flinch away. To you, it looks like games, like mixed signals, like manipulation. But to them, it's survival. They don't know how to hold need and fear in the same body. So they swing wildly between them. One moment craving you, the next running from you. And here's where it hurts the most. Every pull they make toward you feels genuine. Because in that moment, it is. When they text you, when they call, when they say, I miss you, that's not fake. That's their truth. But the moment the closeness becomes real, the fear rises like a wave. And suddenly, the truth flips. Now their truth is, I need to get away. I can't breathe. This is too much. It's not dishonesty. It's fragmentation. They live in pieces. And whichever piece screams loudest becomes the one they obey. This is why relationships with avoidance feel so disorienting. One day, you feel like the center of their world. The next, you feel like a stranger. It's not that their love disappears overnight. It's that their fear rises. And in the presence of fear, love becomes too dangerous to show. So they push, even while they're aching to pull. But here's the hidden truth. The push never cancels the pull. Even when they distance, the longing doesn't vanish. Even when they retreat, the ache doesn't die. That's why they circle. That's why they return. That's why they can't seem to let you go completely. Because every time they push, they eventually feel the emptiness of being without you. And every time they pull, they eventually feel the terror of being too close. So they swing, back and forth, push and pull, longing and fear. And in the middle of this chaos, you're left dizzy, wondering if they care at all, questioning your worth, trying to decode what feels undecodable. But the truth is simpler than it looks. They do care. They just don't know how to stay. Because staying requires vulnerability. And vulnerability, to them, feels like stepping into fire. So what's the cost of this dance? For them, it's exhaustion, living in constant conflict, wanting love, but fearing love, longing for closeness, but sabotaging it the moment it appears. For you, it's confusion, the constant whiplash of hope and disappointment, the pain of being pulled close, only to be pushed away again. And unless something breaks the cycle, the dance continues endlessly. Push, pull, near, far. Until one day, the silence becomes louder than the swing, and both sides are forced to face what this pattern has really cost. This is the heart of the avoidance struggle. Not a lack of feeling, but too much feeling, trapped inside too much fear. And once you stop being the safety net, this storm inside them has no escape. They're forced to feel both the ache of love and the terror of it, without a buffer. And that changes everything. The moment of choice. There comes a point where even the avoidant can't outrun themselves. Because silence, that thing they used to crave, that thing they once believed would protect them, becomes unbearable. At first, your absence feels like relief, space, freedom. But time has a way of stripping away illusions. And what once felt like freedom begins to feel like loss. It starts small. A thought of you while they're making coffee. A memory flashing uninvited in the middle of the night. A song, a scent, a place that reawakens what they buried. Their defenses whisper, "You're fine without them." But their body replies, "Then why does it ache like this?" This is the breaking point. The moment they can no longer deny that your silence isn't punishment. It's proof. Proof that the dynamic has shifted. Proof that the safety net is gone. Proof that the comfort of being able to run, while still being caught, no longer exists. And in that realization, they face a choice they've avoided their whole life. Do they step forward? Do they risk vulnerability? Do they let themselves be seen, not just in strength, but in need? Or do they retreat fully, choosing loneliness over the terrifying exposure of love? This is not an easy choice, because for the avoidant, both paths feel like death. Connection feels like the death of control. Loneliness feels like the death of love. But here's the paradox. For the first time, they can't have both. They can't have your closeness without your chase. They can't have your presence without your pursuit. They can't keep running and still be held. So something has to give. If their fear wins, they may double down on distance, convincing themselves you didn't matter, telling their story in a way that protects their pride. I didn't need them anyway. And yet, late at night, when no one is watching, the truth leaks through. Because no matter how strong the walls, they can't erase the imprint you left. They can't unteach their body the safety it once felt with you. And they can't silence the ache that your absence carved out inside them. But sometimes, and this is where the surprising response comes in, love wins. Not the kind of love that's loud and dramatic, but the quiet, trembling love that rises when fear is finally outlasted. Because when the avoidant realizes you're not coming to rescue them anymore, they also realize something else. If they want connection, they have to step toward it, not in half measures, not in games, but with risk, with honesty, with need. And that terrifies them, but it also awakens them. For the first time, they see that silence doesn't protect. It only isolates. For the first time, they realize that love, as frightening as it is, may be the only thing strong enough to silence the ache of their own loneliness. And for the first time, they begin to choose. Not escape, not distance, not running, but staying. Even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect, even if it means being seen in ways they swore they never would. And this is the moment that reveals everything. Because whether they step toward you or step away, their choice is no longer about you chasing. It's about them deciding. And in that shift, the dynamic changes forever. They are no longer in control by avoidance. They are faced with the truth of themselves. And though it may not happen overnight, this is the turning point where real change begins. Here's the lesson buried inside their silence. When you stop being the safety net, you don't just change the relationship, you change the avoidant. Because you remove the option of running and being held. You force the question they've been avoiding their entire life. Do you want love enough to face your fear? And in that question, their true self is revealed. For some, it will mean losing them because the fear is still too great. But for others, the ones who are finally ready, it will mean seeing a side of them you thought you'd never see. Not the distant one, not the cold one, not the self-protected one, but the human one, the vulnerable one, the one who finally admits, I need you. I care. I was scared, but I don't want to run anymore. That's the surprising response. Not always a happy ending, not always a reconciliation, but always a truth. Because when you stop being the avoidance safety net, you finally see who they really are. Beneath the fear, and whether they stay or go, you gain clarity. You stop chasing shadows. You stop mistaking silence for strength. And you finally get to decide, too. Because love is not just about whether they choose you. It's about whether you choose yourself. And maybe that's the hidden gift of this whole journey. That in letting go of being their safety net, you also learn that you never needed to be one. You were never meant to catch someone running. You were meant to walk beside someone willing to stay. And once you know that, everything changes.